It is 22 minutes after 7 o'clock. You're listening to Kaya Biz here on Kaya 959. And of course, we're still bringing you our special broadcast of our C-Suite conversation. As you can tell, we have a hive of activity here at 195 Jan Smuts Kaya House, where we've been speaking to different CEOs, CFOs, and of course general managers to give us some details into the operating environment in business. This is for my digital audience who might be joining us on our video line. I've come with a bunch of flowers, or I have received a bunch of flowers, and this is in acknowledgement of Kaya Biz having recently won the Telkom SA Radio Awards for 2023 Best Business and Finance Show. So I'll hand it over to our colleague Sinenjabulo Sibeko just to hold on to these. Thank you so much. And of course, yes, star producer is the name that I gave him, and he wants to be referred to as that going forward. But of course, as we've been speaking to various business leaders, we've also been reflecting on some of the questions that they might have had to answer from various members of our audience. And of course, just giving us clarity into some of the initiatives and investments that they've had to make in order to keep their businesses functioning and operational. A few of our audience members have sidestepped just for some refreshments, but the rest of you are still here and you are live, right? Yes. There we go. Thank you. That's the energy that we're looking for. And now we're going to get into a very important conversation, because you and I, we are all impacted by the macroeconomic environment in South Africa, where we are with economic growth, what kind of job opportunities we have, how it is that we as entrepreneurs can access opportunities, financing, support, and of course grow within the economy. So we thought, in conclusion to the C-Suite discussion this evening, we'd definitely hear from an economist to give us some insight into the recent economic data that we've had, but also helping us understand and contextualize it to meet and suit our lives as entrepreneurs, employers, employees, and of course those pursuing opportunities in the country. And for that, I'm joined, of course, in studio by the amazing independent entrepreneur that is Khanyisa Phika, who joins us to give us some insight into some of these numbers. Such a pleasure to have you with us, ma'am.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Congratulations again.
Thank you so much.
Well done, team.
Truly, truly appreciate it. Yep, we made it happen as a team overall. And Khanyisa, it's not easy, because to make it happen, we're on a business show, we discuss economics. And you would know, economics is not always very encouraging, especially at the moment when you look at South Africa's economic performance. I've highlighted many of the issues, and typically I ask many economists, do you sleep well at night with all these data points you need to worry about?
Look, if we sleep, then we can't share these insights.
Yep.
So it's important for us to be on the lookout, and just so that we can, demystify what the numbers actually mean, so that you can relate to them.
100%.
So that's why we stay awake.
Definitely. And you have been crunching the numbers, and maybe let's just refer to the most recent print, right? Stats SA today telling us that our economy contracted by 0.2%. So in other words, we haven't grown, receded by 0.2%. Not too confident, right? I mean, it's not a great number.
Look, it's also not surprising, because much of the first half of this year was some resilience that we didn't expect, particularly because load shedding was persistent. Yes, it was better in terms of the load reductions, but then you started to see a lot of the Transnet grey hairs start to show.
Yeah.
And businesses have been, and sectors have been, overwhelmed by the inefficiencies of our royal road and infrastructure there. So I think when you look at the numbers, you see agriculture was hardest hit for the primary sector, and that was usually where our resilience would be. Manufacturing, not surprising, also because of electricity shortages and also the transport of some of the goods that are being sent out. I think you can tell which businesses are more resilient, like the trade sector, or rather the finance sector, which really was resilient. Not much growth, still below 0.5%, but it just goes to show you that those are where the funds are to keep businesses going, where businesses are able to not only provide work from home, but also sustain their load shedding with other efforts.
Yes.
But you see that with the other sectors, it does become quite a strain, and that's why we saw a shortage of 0.2% or grade of 2% in growth this quarter.
Got you. And as you say, not surprising because you're alluding to issues that we've all read about, we've spoken about, we've experienced as well, and understand the economic challenges behind these. But Khanyisa, I guess for many of us in South Africa, we already feel as though we are in a recession. Beginning of 2023, there was a lot of concern that we'd dip into a recession. Even the US had some concerns around that. But characterize, I guess, the nuances of this year for us. It does seem as though it's been such a stretch just to get by. And even though we are moving, we are growing, in some sectors we're just not seeing the necessary improvement.
Absolutely. And I think many South Africans can relate to this because with a growth rate that's below 1% overall for this year, you cannot expect that South Africans are better off. In fact, we are worse off than we were even prior to the pandemic.
Sure.
What that means is that we are growing at less than 1% as an economy, but our population is growing at 1.5%.
Yeah.
So we're not even meeting just to get by.
And the broader consequence of that is that we're actually getting poorer.
We're getting poorer, and South Africans can actually feel it. We started off the year, yes, there was some resilience in some levels of growth during the first 2 quarters, but people started downgrading even the shows they were watching on DSTV, or at least the packages they had, some of the food shops they were buying from. And now we're starting to see that consumers are constrained because as much as they were taking up debt to, supplement their incomes, now we're seeing that being translated to debt services costs, because higher interest rate meant higher borrowing costs, making it more tougher for the consumer. And when you look at the latest BER consumer confidence numbers, they actually show that consumers are depressed.
Yeah.
And it's unlikely to improve at a rapid rate. I think we can expect this momentum to continue over the medium term, I think. Before we actually see, the economy needs to actually grow faster for us to see improvement.
There's a question that I've typically asked quite a few guests on the show, and I've asked, is Christmas still going to be merry? Because as you say, confidence is low, unemployment is high, we're struggling with high interest rates. Is it still going to be a festive?
One thing about South Africans, they will party their sorrows. If anything,
that's true.
I have seen that what we can do is celebrate. And I think we'll see a lot of those people that have benefited from investing in stokvels. Those will help them a lot for the festive season. I mean, when we look at the latest inflation prices, you see meat prices were lower, so that should add on to the braai
yes,
menu. But yes, generally South Africans are constrained, and when you look at the kind of products that consumers are buying, it's really food products, things that can help them get by, nothing durable or long term, because really now we are in survival mode, I think.
Definitely. Khanyisa, there's so many moving factors, and I guess as we look forward to what it is we can control as entrepreneurs and as South Africans, when we think Transnet, Eskom, these are huge organizations, right, that we always have conversations about, but it just seems so overwhelming to fix, and rightfully so, because they need a lot of partnership, they need leadership, they need policy and regulatory changes. But what can we do as South Africans, or what do we need to understand about the consequence of the challenges at these SOEs? And I ask this deliberately bearing in mind that next year's an election year, and typically what happens at a political front will influence the management of SOEs, which will influence the running of the economy.
Absolutely. And as you were asking your question, I just had a picture in my mind of one of the social influencers saying the discussions they are having with their friends lately is, have you registered to vote?
What is your status there? The IEC, right?
And it will be very important for all South Africans to actually say and put their mark next year. We are in a very uncertain environment. Some people have, compared it to pre-1994, saying that this is kind of like a shake-up that we saw then. But I think there's a lot of opportunity in understanding that, yes, perhaps people are unsure of who to vote for. But the fact is, when you look at the recent survey on the political arena, South Africans are worried about corruption. The first thing that I think on top of that list is unemployment. So you would want to make sure that your voice is heard about your concerns. You want an economy that's growing so that you can be able to work. You want an economy that is less of corruption so that it's fair, especially for entrepreneurs who want to enter and service sectors and communities. And when you also think about it, that load shedding is now, I think, third of that list. Meaning that we have become comfortable with not having electricity on a full-time basis, but also saying that we've probably invested in how to manage around it. And we've seen a lot of businesses also.
Generators, inverters. I've actually seen South Africans become a lot more relieved when they say, oh, it's stage 3, I go on. It's better. Once you hear stage 4, 5, 6, that's when we actually start to panic. But the 3 and the 2, we can actively manage and work our way around. I do want us to get a few questions before we do wrap up this conversation. But what is very important, Khanyisa, as you've mentioned, South Africans are resilient, but there's a sense of fatigue.
Yeah.
We're getting tired of, again, the high levels of unemployment. It seems like there are some policies from government, they implemented at a local government level, but the long-term output isn't there. We also have a high level of unemployed graduates in South Africa. Entrepreneurs and business owners typically struggle with the heightened level of red tape in South Africa. As an economist, when you speak to consumers as to how we can prepare our minds as entrepreneurs, our households as consumers, what do we need to be mindful of, especially when it comes to understanding where we are in terms of the interest rate cycle, economic growth, and how these hamper and impact our income generating capacity?
I think, when we look at where we've come from this year, high inflation has moderately eased, I think, and that is likely to continue. So inflation is coming down nicely. Interest rate may not come down as quickly as we expect, but I think we can start seeing the Reserve Bank start to lower those interest rates towards the second half of next year. And I think that will ease a lot of the disposable incomes for South Africans. There are a lot of risks, of course, because we are an economy that operates within the global space. And because also we are open to trading with others, we do fall risk of what happens out there. Global growth will be slower. Our biggest trading partner is expected to grow below about 5% this year. And maybe
China.
even down, China down to a little of 3% next year. So that tells you that demand for our minerals, for our exports in general, will likely be weaker. So I think the opportunities will lie in various sectors. So entrepreneurs will have to have their ears and eyes open to see where sectors are. Food stability is something that is still serious. So if you're in the agricultural space, you do know that there is, support for irrigation, support for expansion. So small businesses just need to be in the loop, find out where government is funding, but also, a lot of our banks are also funding most of the progress that's expected over the medium term. While I suppose, when you have a lower confidence level, that does not bode well for investors. And so they keep their pockets closed up. And because also there's the whole uncertainty around how the election process will come out, that makes, investors become a little bit edgy. But it's not to say there are no opportunities, because in every crisis, as we've seen, there's a whole lot of growth. We've seen with the renewable energy sector that is booming. And now that, Transnet has admitted to its lagging, there will be opportunities, as they have started, for royals and even the ports to take up investment from the private sector.
Which, will definitely come in handy in terms of the operational efficiencies, given the government guarantee that they received just on Friday. We're happy to take 2 questions very briefly from you. Perfect. We've got 2 hands. Anyone else? Just in case the speaker might be blocking you. I'm cognizant of that. But go ahead, ma'am.
Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Bunye Chikudo. I am a first-year student at UNISA. So to answer you, Mrs. M, I wanted to say that maybe Christmas will be a little bit merry, because what I remember from my economics teacher last year is that after increasing inflation, prices of goods and services won't increase immediately like the next day, right? So and then another thing I want to say is that I wish if we could be more specific when it comes to talking about jobs. I want us to stop saying, let's create jobs. I want us to be specific. What kind of jobs do we need? The youth that we have, the skills that we have. I know that we have, we normally have low skills and semi-skills. So let's create the kind of jobs for the kind of skills that we have.
100%.
My question is, I want to know whether when lowering interest rates, do we as people that save, will our money increase or gonna decrease?
You know what I love about you? You've given us a great understanding of the fact that you love economics. Yeah. I know that you're passionate about broadcasting as well. So one day you'll take my job. And most importantly, that you're a saver as well and are intrigued and following up with these particular processes. But Khanyisa, you're the economist here, right? Lower interest rates and savings.
Look, it's investor frenzy right now. High interest rates bode well for investors because obviously you've put in the risk to put your money in for longer or for whatever period, and you expect the premium, right? You expect to get the return for it. Lower inflation or lower interest rates allow us to have more in our pocket. It doesn't necessarily mean, it just means you can buy more now with the money that you have, unlike when inflation erodes your income, right? Yes. So yes, lower interest rates mean you need to diversify your investment so that you can at least get above inflation rates as something that will help you when interest rates are lower.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Awesome. Always think of inflation as that Pac-Man. You know that game? I'm not too sure if you're young enough to remember. Basically, that eats away at the growth of your business. That's how it makes sense to me.
It does.
So as long as you're beating inflation, then you're on the right track.
Yeah.
We'll take your question, sir.
Expanding on a question in which she had. I think she alluded to the fact that we do not know what type of jobs to have and whatnot. I want to ask, though, with regards to making investments, especially into the future, right? Which sector should we, make investments into in order to create jobs that will be, sustainable over the long run, especially in light of the SDG goals for the United Nations and many other organizations which also, affiliate with such. What sector do we invest in? What sector does the government invest in? And also, even for us as consumers, as people, regular people here in South Africa, where do we go? What type of jobs do we look for to make sure that we're also pouring into the economy?
Ntsikelelo, I love your forward thinking. Hey?
Great question.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, there is great opportunity in our economy as much as we are struggling, right? I think the easiest is the word that I can think of now, is for us to understand what our economy needs. We need an economy that grows and sustainably so, right? And because of that, we need to invest in infrastructure. We need to invest in those areas that growth will happen. So for example, the crippling of our growth is on poor roads, poor ports and all of that. So jobs will be on that front because that's where investment is going to fix that. Electricity has been a problem for many years. That's where the skills you need will have to come from. In the financial sector, really, it's about understanding the risks that are happening. How can funders protect themselves, but also put in or invest into these communities or sectors that they want to fund? So you'll need to have a broader understanding of ESG, for example, understand sustainability to be able to be in part, be part of the SDG goals. We know that South Africa has also been placed under the FATF restrictions. So that means that we need to have more law enforcement. We need more legal people or people that understand the law to be able to actually execute the required prosecutions. We also know that, those will be our fast wins, right? So we fix the roads, we fix the electricity, we fix our corruption, and that will attract a different type of, investor who has actually been stepping on our door, saying, South Africa, you have greater potential. We like what you have. You have a young population. There's so much more we can do, but that confidence is not there. It's not fully there, and that's partly because government is also prioritizing their things differently. But I think those are the key sectors that you would need to upskill yourself for better opportunity.
100%. And I think that's really important because it really does speak to the necessary skills development and spotting those opportunities in the market. And as you've mentioned, you've listed a number of sectors. So the truth is, opportunities are plenty. It's just finding the niche and the space within that you actually want to play in, because you could be managing the finances of an energy firm or infrastructure. So don't limit yourself to purely think that, it's one sector, it requires one skill. There's really a varied way within which you can approach it.
I agree.
Yeah. Khanyisa, we've discussed so much, and the truth is, when it comes to South Africa's economy, we can talk about a lot more, whether it be economic policies, whether it be, this monetary policy as well that we see, fiscal consolidation, the two-pot system. Truth is, we can take this conversation anywhere. But as we've been doing with many of our previous guests, as you look forward to the year 2024 and perhaps highlight some economic expectations we need to be mindful of that speak to the entrepreneurs, that speak to us as employees, what do we need to be mindful of?
So growth will continue to be modest, I think, in the next year, although it will improve from current levels. I think, the IMF has said we'll grow about just 0.8% this year. So we're expecting to be around 1.5% next year.
So it's not a recession, but really, really slow growth.
Very slow growth.
Okay.
Inflation will come down. And I think the MPC will be happy to have it where it's contained. There are risks to it. Of course, the El Nino effects have not necessarily, played out. We still have food, for example, but there are other geopolitical risks that we need to be cognizant of that continue, which may worsen. We don't know, because as soon as we think.
And that's very true, because we've actually forgotten about Russia and Ukraine, and that crisis is still happening, and it's still impacting the global economy.
Absolutely.
As well as the challenges in the Middle East, right?
Yeah. So yes. So inflation will come down. I think fuel prices and commodity prices will be a little bit lower. Commodity prices means, if they're lower, means that, our terms of trade will be constrained. And with the fiscal trajectory also deteriorating, I think it's going to be very challenging for the finance minister to contain that path because of the things that, we still have in our expenditure list, particularly because South Africans are still struggling and they have extended that distress grant as well. And also having to support these SOEs that need support for them to actually function. They have had some strictness and rules around how they will fund SOEs, but I do think it'll be challenging to actually maintain that strictness.
Yeah.
Overall, it's going to be a low growth environment, particularly because our key traders will also be experiencing slow growth. Inflation will be coming down. Interest rates will probably come down towards the end. So that will be easing for the consumer. But what we've also seen is that consumers are now, 3 months behind their debt. So it just tells you that it's going to get tough before it recovers. But also in that same sense, there will be opportunities because the Eskom is likely to improve their load shedding next year. They will be adding another generating unit, so we'll have less load shedding next year. How quick Transnet is going to transform, I think we will have to wait and see. There are some advances that have been made by government, but nothing that we've seen as, on the ground activity that's happening yet.
100%. Khanyisa, thank you so much for your time and making it easy to understand the economics of South Africa. And the fact is, as we've always been saying, tighten your belts, just get ready one more time. Breathe in and suck it in and, of course, tighten our belts. As Khanyisa has mentioned, it will take time before things do start getting better, but that doesn't negate the opportunities that continue to exist for many entrepreneurs and those of you looking for employment. There are opportunities. Be mindful of how you partner, where you partner, but there are collaborative efforts that certainly exist. And most importantly, take care of your personal finances, which is also very important, as Khanyisa has mentioned, and also the feedback that we got from our junior economics lecturer. Trust me, watch her. She's up and coming, and recall seeing you at the Standard Bank Kasi SME Summit. So really appreciate the fact that you are continuing to show your support for the show. Khanyisa Phika, thank you so much for your time, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Gugu.
Fantastic.
So glad. Thank you to the audience. The questions were really fun.
Right? You guys have been a vibe. Really appreciate it. Well, that was our guest, Khanyisa Phika, who's an independent economist joining us this evening. We have been maneuvering with the adverts this evening. But, of course, we've given you quite a bit of insight into our C-suite discussion with various leaders, economists as well, and our phenomenal audience who've been giving us some insight. It's 12 minutes to 8 o'clock. You're listening to Kaya Biz.